now see if we can cross to our SABC News senior reporter, Griselda Lewis, who is with family members at the moment after having listened to that particular judgment. Griselda, over to you. I can only imagine what the family members are reacting at this present time following that particular judgment.
Well, absolutely, Unathi. It's been an 8-year wait for justice, and we'll hear from one of the family members in just a short moment what their reaction is to this moment they've been waiting for a very long time. You recall, of course, that this inquest was basically gotten underway to determine who should be held criminally liable for the deaths of those more than 100 mental health care users. And the families have been calling for justice. It's been years of agony and pain, not knowing who should be held accountable. And you would have heard there in that judgment, a bit scathing there. The judge therefore indicate that she was not going to read the full judgment, but just the conclusion. Perhaps when we delve into the full judgment, we'll get a full extent of what exactly the court has handed down, but basically saying that the conclusion is that there was neglect in the deaths of these mental health care users, and the names that have been mentioned there over and over is that, of course, of the former health MEC, Katani Mahlangu, as well as the former mental health Manamela. And the judge Tifa basically saying that Mahlangu, who was the former health MEC, had basically terminated the Esidimeni contract despite expert advice and several warnings, and that her conduct had led to the deaths that could have been avoided. And that basically, they were transferred to these ill-equipped and, unlawful NGOs, despite numerous warnings that had been given to the department. This certainly has been described, Unathi, over the past couple of years as, the worst tragedy to befall South Africa since the dawn of democracy. And one of the family members, who has been reeling and has been at the forefront of calling for justice is Christine Nxumalo. You'd recall, of course, that her sister, Virginia Makapela, was one of the victims of the Life Esidimeni tragedy. Her sister had been transferred from one of those facilities to an unlawful NGO without the knowledge of the family, learning days later that, in fact, her sister had basically passed away. And I want to bring in Christine Nxumalo just moments after this judgment has been handed down. Sis Christine.
I have no words. I am so emotional. I have no words. I have no words because, it's been a long wait for this. It's been a long wait for this. And to find that, everything that we've been saying, the warnings, the attempts to stop, everything we tried to do was exactly what the judge said. Had they only listened and paused, we wouldn't be sitting here right now. But I am so happy that the judge, I don't even know how I feel. I'm laughing because I actually don't want to cry, but wow, it's been such a long time. I can't believe it. I can't believe it. Because and thank God for Judge Steph, she was listening, which confirmed what I said to you a while back. And I said to her, she seemed like she was listening. She seemed like she was paying attention. And today, she did. She was paying attention. She listened to every single thing that was said. So I'm elated. I'm elated. I really am, because I wish I could just play back some of the visuals of trying to reach out to the two that I mentioned. And you would understand the family's frustration. We tried everything to reach out to them. If only they had listened. If only they had listened. I hear now. I I don't know. I was nervous and I was emotional, but now I'm even more emotional because the fight was not for nothing. We were right. We were right all along. You know, sometimes you play something in your head and you're asking yourself, are we doing the right thing? Are we not being overzealous? Are we maybe not just being too personal? But no, we weren't. These were human beings, vulnerable human beings. And if the system doesn't protect them, who else will?
Sis Christine, we've not seen the full judgment yet, but from what we heard from Judge Difo, she confirms that there was neglect.
Absolutely.
She confirms that this could have been avoided. And says that basically the former health minister, Katani Mahlangu, and the former mental health director, Magabo Manamela,
Could have.
this could have been prevented. So she basically places
So
the deaths of amongst your sister. Your sister's name was mentioned twice.
Yeah.
Virginia Macapella.
Gwendolyn Virginia Macapel. Yeah. Yeah.
And basically says that their names are placed, that of Katani Mahlangu as well as Magabo Manamela. And she says, yes,
They could have. They could.
amongst those, your sister's death could have been avoided.
Yeah.
You started speaking even way before I even asked the question, and I can imagine. But what does this moment mean for you as families?
The fight was not for nothing. If nothing else, my sister knows that we fought really hard for her. This was in honor of her and every other patient that died. It was horrific how they died, Griselda. It was horrific. It's like they were, I don't even think people want to see dogs die like that. They died like they were less human. So I am very happy right now with the judge. So now the next leg starts. So obviously we will get a, like you're saying, the rest of the judgment and kind of hear what else is in there, what else is contained in there. But I think this for me was well worth the fight. I mean, even if it didn't rule in our favor, the fact that we got here for us was a victory because we didn't give up. So now that the victory is in our favor, it's even more sweeter. It really is more sweeter.
And what has these 8 years been like for you as a family? And I ask this because your family suffered a double blow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your sister
And her daughter.
passed away in this tragedy. And I recall you saying her daughter was not sick.
She wasn't.
Her daughter passed away, was it several?
Yeah. She passed away literally on the first day of arbitration. So it means she was holding on. You know, like she was keeping all this trauma and whatever in. Because when we asked what caused her death, she was not sick. The nation would be heartbreak. I didn't even, you know, I've heard people say that. I never thought I would get that as a reason for one of my loved ones dying. She couldn't be without her mom. They were incredibly close. They were one and the same thing. So you can imagine all those years of watching her sister go through that. I mean, it was difficult for her, understanding that her mom, you know, had a mental illness. Now and again, and eventually being admitted to Life Esidimeni, because she was at Charlotte Maxeke for a while, for about 3 months, you know, trying to get to a diagnosis. That time alone, that 3 months alone, was traumatic for her. Now, can you imagine what happened after Life Esidimeni? So that must have been intense for her, because we kept on saying, don't you want counseling? And she's like, I'm fine, I'm fine. Until Section 27, you know, did the counseling session for Coralie Trotter to kind of gauge the trauma. And she said, I did not want to do.
Nomalo, Sis Christine, I was at a crucial part of asking you whether this is the justice that you wanted for your sister, for Shanice and all the other families who went through this devastating tragedy, not listen.
Yeah, no, this is what we had asked for. This is what we wanted them to understand, that the actions actually led to the deaths. The decision and the deliberate blocking out of the expert reports, the protests, the calls for answers, the relentless nagging of families and everybody else in that mental health, space, trying to call on them to say, stop, please stop. This is the result. If we always talk about consequence management, this is exactly the result of them not listening. So yes, it is for the families. It is definitely for, and especially for how they died, Griselda. I think we focus on their deaths, and I know it's important, but it's how they died. I think we don't focus enough on how they died. Because, it's one thing to sit there and be hungry for 2-3 days, for weeks on end, without food, no one caring for you. And you make that decision, and you're not reversing it. No. This is exactly what we needed. I really want to hear the rest of the judgment. I'm actually quite curious to hear what the rest of the judgment says. But I'm glad those two, because they were probably the most rudest to the families during that period. So yes.
You were watching this judgment with your family.
Yeah.
And I saw your son.
Yeah, my firstborn son.
Your firstborn son break down.
Yeah, no, he's been holding it together for the longest time. Remember, he was Auntie Pinky's first, because he and Shanice were born the same year, months apart. So that was his friend, They were soulmates, so to speak. So, yeah.
To see your kids like that.
And this 8 years for them hasn't been good. It hasn't been good. For all of them, actually. So, the fact that they're okay now, or they're able to watch this with me, it's well worth it. Honestly, it's well worth it. It's been really hard.
Sis Christine, the names of Katani Mahlangu and Dr. Magabo Manamela have been mentioned multiple times, also against the name of your sister. What do you want to happen next?
Criminal charges. It's really simple. Criminal charges. That's it. They need to go and explain how they could have just ignored all those. It's okay to ignore the families because we know nothing, right? But the professionals who literally constantly tried, she needs to explain that. She needs to explain that. And I hope somewhere in there they mention Ethel Ncube. Because
from Precious Angels, that's where your sister had been transferred to, and that NGO.
Yes, 22 people apparently died there, yes. So I hope somewhere in that judgment they mention her. Because she too needs to answer. Because to her it was about money. It was never about the loved ones because she had no experience. She didn't even try. There's one thing not to know, not to have the experience. But the least she could have tried is to get the relevant people. She had a gardener doing the rounds, looking after the loved ones. And then to shove cabbage down my sister's throat after she passed away. What do you call that? So no, she can't get off. I pray she doesn't get off. So it will be interesting to see the rest of the judgment, yeah.
And it was the manner in which your sister died.
I remember when we did the post-mortem, I kept asking for it. I don't know if you recall. I kept on nagging for the post-mortem. They refused to give me the post-mortem. I literally got the post-mortem during the inquest, just before Dr. Onaya did his testimony. And Dr. Onoya, yes, did the testimony.
And what you found?
I didn't think it was possible. Because he basically says she had no water in her body, which meant for weeks, if not months, she was without water. She wasn't fed. And that's the same type of, period. There was very little water in her body, including her bladder. She had gangrene in both her feet, which meant where they put her, they left her. They never moved her, they never tried, they never did nothing. To make it worse, they force-fed her. Well, I wouldn't say force-fed because the doctor said it must have been post her dying that they shoved it. If they did it prior to her dying...
Is that to try and conceal her not having been fed
that's in essence
for so long? Why would you give someone cabbage after they've passed away?
Exactly. So he said if it was before she died, it would have been just before she died, because there was no there was no chewing, no, showing that this person, she was too weak to chew. So he's in his mind is thinking it could have only happened after she had passed away, but it's either just before or after she passed away.
Just in closing, says Christine, I know it's been incredibly difficult for you to do this interview. Just fresh off this judgment, off an 8-year wait for some kind of justice.
Mm-hmm.
What is it that you want to say?
I hope this becomes the norm in government. I hope this is how accountability looks like in government, and not just in the health sector, every single way. Because the way we treat our people, Griselda, in South Africa, the way we treat our people with disability, the way we treat our people with mental illness, it's shocking. It's shocking.
What should be done to ensure this never happens again?
Well, look, the only way this will never happen again is if they go to jail. And I hope next time we won't have to wait for 8 years before a judgment is given. And we won't have to go through an inquest. It must be so simple and so clear forward that we go from, you were found to have done this, you are suspended without pay, not even with pay, and you need to go and answer to court what happened. And it must be almost as smooth as that. The fact that in South Africa, the perpetrator ends up having more rights than the victim and the family, that's another thing that I don't quite understand in South Africa. Look at how we've suffered. Ask them what they've been doing in the past 8 years. Do you think they even thought about what they've done to us, besides going to answer at the arbitration and at the inquest? That's probably
people must go to jail.
Do you understand? That was probably just inconveniences for them. What about us?
That would satisfy you, seeing people behind bars.
If you've done wrong, especially when you've been given numerous opportunities to revisit, to rethink. And why do you have qualified people in your space but you don't take the advice? What's the purpose of that? Does it mean because you are a political head you don't have to listen? So this, for me, should be the norm of if you do wrong and you don't comply and you don't do things ethically. And it shouldn't, the timeline shouldn't be this long. The timeline should not be this long. The trauma that families face during that, I would not want any other family, as God is my witness, to ever have to go through this. I'm hoping that our families, our suffering, has kind of like set the way of how things should happen. But the timeline needs to really, really decrease. But we need to treat our people better. We definitely need to start treating our people, especially the vulnerable. It's unacceptable. It really is unacceptable.
Sis Christine, I don't know how you've managed.
I don't know either.
For 8 years.
I don't know.
With these families. I recall from the time of the arbitration hearings with retired Justice Dikgang Moseneke, reaching the conclusion of that, and now reaching the conclusion of this one. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for walking the way with us. Because I still say, thanks to media, because had it not been for media, I don't think this would have come to light. It was one thing fighting, but if the world didn't understand, if South Africa didn't see what we were talking about, we probably wouldn't be at this point. So my utmost respect for media. I really appreciate you guys right now, more than ever.
It's our duty to do so. Thank you very much, Sis Christine.
Thank you.
if you ever felt that we were being intrusive, thank you for being patient.
No.
As well.
Griselda, intrusive, never.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
says Christine.
Thank you.
Christine Mumalo, there Unati. Harrowing details, having to live through that once again. In case there's any viewer that may have forgotten what her sister, Virginia Macapella, together with others, the other mental health care users, had gone through, being transferred to these ill-equipped and unlawful NGOs after the cancellation of the Life Esidimeni contract. She giving harrowing details about what the autopsy had found, the post-mortem had found, her sister being fed cabbage after she had passed away. No water found in her body, possibly from what doctors had found, had not had water in possibly weeks to even months. Can only paint a picture of what these mental health care users had gone through, and quite scathing. While we've not yet seen the full judgment itself, but Judge Tifo basically saying this was sheer neglect. This should have never happened. These deaths could have been avoided, and placing the blame squarely on the former health MEC Gretani Mahlangu, as well as Dr. Mahabo Malamela, was the former mental health care director. But what is to be said of those NGOs where those mental health care users had died? For example, at the NGO where Christine's sister was, there were, I think, about over 20 mental health care users that had died in those conditions there. So somewhat, you know, a victory in a fight by these families of 8 years that these families have been waiting for justice. But now, amongst others, and I think the sentiment will be shared amongst other family members as well, what they want to see now is those criminal charges being preferred against these individuals who've been now fingered by these courts to have been neglected in how the cancellation of this Life Esidimeni contract had been carried out. Criminal charges is what these families want now to be preferred, and this is certainly what you will hear from the other families as well. Certainly a very emotional day for Christine Mumalo and other family members as this judgment is handed down in the 8-year-old Life Esidimeni tragedy. Certainly one of the most embarrassing moments for government in democratic South Africa. More than 100 mental health care users having been passed away after the cancellation of that contract and being transferred to unlawful as well as equipped NGOs. Onati, I'm going to leave it here for myself and Sis Christine, because it's been a very long day. She's been emotional for most of the day together with her children, who've been hugging her as they watched the proceedings this afternoon.